Hi, do you know what today's thought? And today we're going back to the Middle East, back to Israel, back to the Israel-Gaza war. And, well, before I give you my comments, let's go right to a video that I have to show you. This is the Bill Maher Show. He is interviewing a gentleman named Douglas Murray. Douglas Murray is, well, you'll tell by his accent that he's British. He's an author, conservative commentator, spends a lot of time in Israel. And, well, let's go right to the video, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
I don't think there's any law of war that says you can start a war, and then when you begin to lose it, you say, let's pretend we didn't start it.
But that is always what Israel faces.
Sure. I mean, it's very strange. A year before I was in Ukraine, I was with the Ukrainian armed forces when they were retaking land from the Russians, and nobody was saying, oh, hold on, don't win too much. Everyone was egging them on. Every Western leader gets a shot of testosterone whenever they talk about the Ukrainian armed forces. And yet the Israelis never allowed to win.
Yeah.
Very strange.
What Murray just said in the video that you saw, that's exactly what I believe. And I mean, it's obvious. It's an obvious pattern, but there is something I want to add to what Murray said, which you saw a hint of in the title to this video, which is, well, Israel is the only Jewish state. And if it's the only Jewish state, that means all the other states, by definition, by default, they're all Gentile states. And although, well, not all of those, let's be fair, a lot of those states, maybe most of those states, definitely going by votes in the United Nations, are pressuring Israel not to win the Israel-Gaza war. And as Murray said, contrast that with Ukraine, where all these countries, well, the French, the Germans, the British, Sweden, I believe, several countries, they're all, and I could be wrong on Sweden, but all these countries are supporting sending aid to Ukraine and rooting for them to win. But Israel, just the opposite. Now, this is a pattern, and I'm going to try to come up with an explanation in this thought for today. But this is a pattern going all the way back, never mind the current war, never mind the 67 war, all the way back to 1956. Now, 56 was the second in a series of Israel-Arab wars. The first one, of course, was 1948, the War of Independence. But 1956, Egypt closed off the Straits of Tiran, not to be confused with Tehran, the capital of Iran. We're talking about a waterway. So Straits of Tiran and the Gulf of Aqaba to Israeli shipping. And Israel, along with the French and the Brits at that time, who were strong allies of Israel, they invaded Egypt. They invaded Egypt to reverse what Egypt had done, was doing to the Israelis. Our president at the time, Dwight Eisenhower, pressured them to stop. Not to win, basically not to win. And eventually, I think it was pretty soon afterwards that the Straits of Tiran were reopened to Israel. And then it was a year later, I think, that the Gulf of Aqaba was finally reopened to Israeli shipping. And it was the Suez Canal that Egypt shut off in 67, which triggered another war. Well, that and surrounding countries invading Israel, lining up their tanks and materiel on the border, obviously getting ready to go into Israel. Israel fought, and within 6 days defeated all of their enemies, and were on the verge. They were heading towards Cairo, Amman, Damascus. They were heading there, and they were pressured to stop. I'm old enough to watch the negotiations in the United Nations. Basically, though, pressured Israel to stop short of winning. Same thing happened in 1973. Israel was invaded by was invaded by Egypt, or maybe they. Don't hold me to that. I don't know if they got all the way into Israel proper, but they definitely crossed the Suez Canal, and they were threatening Israel. And Nixon, President Nixon at the time, sent to Israel an emergency shipment of weapons that helped them win. But once they turned the tide and they were heading towards Cairo again, they were pressured to stop. And this has happened again and again and again. And one has to wonder what is going on here. And I would say that, I hate to say anti-Semitism, we'll say double standard, but there is something. Again, Israel is the only Jewish state. They are, as Murray pointed out, they are the only state that is always pressured, or fortunately, the Israelis have finally gotten the message, and they have, at least as long as Netanyahu is prime minister, they're not going to do it this time. This time they are going to go, and they are going all the way to the end. They are going to win. What is winning? Let's because our country seems to have forgotten what winning is too. Wars that we have fought and not decisively won. World War II is really the last one, unless you count some minor war. I don't want to get off on a track, as I so often do, but we winning a war is, and it was Douglas MacArthur who said it was, there is no substitute for victory. And victory is the one of two things: the total destruction of the enemy, or the unconditional surrender of the surrender of the enemy, ideally unconditional, but sometimes you negotiate terms, but they go to a complete victory, and that's what Israel is going to do this time. But all the time in the past, Israel, well, even now, they are the only country that is being pressured to essentially lose a war, which is what it would mean if Hamas is allowed to remain in power. And Israelis have said over and over and over again, Netanyahu and his war cabinet have said over and over and over. Joe Biden was touting this peace, this ceasefire plan that he came up with, which is a non sequitur anyhow, because what happened to the ceasefire that was in place on October 6th? How many permanent ceasefires have there been since Israel was reestablished after 2,000 years of occupation by foreign powers in 1948? How many ceasefires have there been, supposedly permanent ceasefires? So the idea that this one would be permanent, why? It's like Lucy in the football. Why would this ceasefire be any different? And the Israelis are not taking the bait, but you have Joe Biden touting this supposed well, the idea is 3 phases, and some hostages Israel would stop fighting, and supposedly the Hamas would stop fighting. I say supposedly, and some hostages would be released, but not all of them. And this would be for 6 weeks, and after 6 weeks, there would be more talking about a permanent ceasefire, and then some more hostages would be released, and then the last stage would be the final, would be rebuilding Gaza, and the rest of the hostages would be released. Nothing about Hamas, whether they would be in power or not. And the Israelis have said they are not going to be in power. They're not going to have any military power, and they are not going to have any governing power. And they've said this over and over. The world refuses to get it. And I think that it is... it's a double standard. I'm not going to say, it borders on anti-Semitism, that there is this idea that Gentiles have a problem with Jews who fight and win, because the vision of the Jews, if the Israelis were wiped out, you would hear, oh, what a pity, those poor Jews, what happened to them if they, as they said about the Holocaust, when we're victims, we get the sympathy of everybody, but when we turn the tables, when we're winning, then Jews, and what I mean, Jews, I don't mean, obviously I'm an American, I'm not an Israel. Well, the same thing here, American, the same thing here. We don't win, but I'm talking about Israel today. We don't win when we could win. That's what's so frustrating sometimes, that we don't force the surrender of our enemies, but that's another subject. The idea is that religiously. Well, I was saying Israel, but let's say here. I've been, I'm a Jew, young in high school. I would get attacked sometimes by 3 or 4 people, and the fight did not go too well if I'm outnumbered. But there was one time I remember some kid who was by himself, no friends with him. He slugged me. I slugged him back, and he just stopped dead. He was like this. He couldn't. The idea of a Jew hitting him back was just did not register. Was just alien to him. That Jews fighting back, they just they think we're all these guys and these weak people in the long black coats and the long sideburns called pious. That's what they're called. That's their vision of Jews even today. And the Israeli army, that it just doesn't compute for a lot of Gentiles. I'm sorry to say, and that is a problem, and that is their worldview, and they don't want to be proven wrong by seeing Jews win. It defeats their stereotype. This is my theory, and I guess take it for what you will. That's why we have a comment section below the video, and you're welcome to comment. I would love to hear your comments, but that there has to be some reason. Put it this way: there has to be some reason. There has to be some reason why Hafez Assad why Assad? I was Hafez Assad. I was talking about Bashar's father. It doesn't matter. Whereas Syria, their civil war, could kill hundreds of thousands, but if it's Arabs killing Arabs, nobody talks about it. No one cares about that. And if it's anybody killing anybody, how many, remember the Hutus and the Tutsis in Africa, this massacre, no one, there's some criticism, but not the kind of criticism that you see of Israel, because they have, Hamas is claiming 35,000 people killed. You want to take their figures and go ahead. The United Nations already disputed those figures, and they're pro-Hamas, and they say those figures are wrong, at least as far as women and children. But then you have to take the Israeli figures, that those are, because Hamas does not separate terrorists and civilians. That's total people killed. So the Israelis, about half of those. The ratio historically is in wars. This is a United Nations figure, is 9-1. That for every combatant that is killed in a war, 9 civilians are killed. Israel, the ratio is about 1-1. But you see the condemnation of Israel for doing everything, and they're accused of. They've evacuated 1 million civilians from, never mind that 80% of them side with Hamas. They've been evacuated from Rafah. They've been providing humanitarian aid, yet they're being accused of genocide, which doesn't, as I said in the past, look at Israel. Israel is 20% Arab. So if Israel is 20% Arab, then, how does that compute? How does that comport with genocide? The goal of eliminating an entire race. It should be zero. It should be zero. The population of Israel, if that's what they were, what their goal was. But they're accused of genocide. But I'm getting off on another track again. So to get back to just Israel, that they're being pressured not to win a war, and they're being pressured to keep Hamas in power, and there has to be a reason why only Israel gets this kind of pressure, why they are not, as Murray said, not allowed to win a war, but obviously Israel doesn't care what somebody is going to allow or not allow. So just say that they are being pressured not to win a war, that they are criticized for winning a war. And I guess that's my thought for today. Thanks for stopping by. Again, your comments welcome below the video. If you could subscribe, that would really be great. Share this video with anyone you think could benefit from it. But most of all, come back and see me again. I would love to see all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.